all about scarcity and how we deal with scarcity. Scarcity is simply the idea of having unlimited wants but limited resources to satisfy and deal with those unlimited wants. For example, let's say that there was an unlimited amount of Xboxes, that you can spawn an Xbox in out of your mind, and that everyone can have an Xbox. In that situation, an Xbox would cost $0 because everyone can have an Xbox. No matter what, an Xbox can be given to everyone, so why would you pay for an Xbox? But in reality, we have a limited amount of resources, a limited amount of Xboxes. So we charge prices for Xboxes since we have to determine who gets the Xboxes. Everyone wants an Xbox. There's unlimited demand for an Xbox, but in reality, there's a limited supply of Xboxes. So we have to charge prices to determine who gets those Xboxes. That's the idea of scarcity, that we have unlimited wants, unlimited demands for every single product, but a limited supply of resources to satisfy those same wants. So economics is just how we deal with scarcity, how we deal with having limited resources. How do we give Xboxes and how do we determine who gets an Xbox when everyone wants an Xbox? That's economics. We determine who gets a product based on different ways and mechanisms of determining that. So simply, economics is the study of how we as humans deal with scarcity. Brings us on to economic systems. The way we deal with scarcity is through our government and society. And every government and society must answer three main economic questions to actually solve and determine scarcity. And the way they answer these three economic questions determines their economic system. What should be produced, how should it be produced, and who gets to use the product. The way a government or society answers these three questions determines their economic system. And their economic system determines scarcity, like how they distribute products, how do they produce those products. It determines how they actually try to solve for scarcity. So there's three main economic systems we're going to deal with. A free market and capitalist economy is an economy where the free market controls all three economic questions. There's little to no government involvement whatsoever, and a free market determines who gets products, how do they distributed, and the market determines how they deal with scarcity, how they deal with those unlimited wants with limited resources. You may have learned in history class about laissez-faire. Laissez-faire just means little government involvement in the economy, and that's basically a free market or capitalist economy. Then we have command economies, or communist or centrally planned economies. In a command economy, the government has complete control and extreme involvement in the economy. It's a complete opposite of a free market. The government determines who gets products, how they're distributed. The government tries to solve for scarcity. So everything is government oriented. The main differences between command and free market economies is that the command economy is fully government, while the free market is completely opposite. The markets control all the prices. The markets determine who gets products. Typically, free markets will have more competition, so they'll have lower quality and higher quality and lower cost products, while command economies will have a lower quality and higher cost products. We also have mixed economies. Mixed economies are a mix of command and free market economies. It's still a free market economy where free markets determine the prices of products, but there's government involvement and government regulations to control some prices, so it's a mix of the two economic systems. The invisible hand is the idea that society's goals will be met when individuals seek their own best self-interest. So basically, when every single individual seeks what they truly best need, and then society will finally meet their end goals. So here's one quick AP question. Pause and see if you can get it right. So you should have gotten C. Command economies have a higher degree of government control over resources. Remember, the main way a command economy differs from a capitalist economy is that command economy has government control, extreme government control, while capitalist economies are completely free market based. So that's the main way to differ. A, command economies have a higher price of oil. That's not right. Economic systems, this isn't about oil. B, capitalist economies have a lower price of oil. Again, it's not about oil. C, command economies have a higher degree of government control over resources. That is correct, because command economies do have a higher degree of government control over everything, and that includes resources based on the three economic questions. D, capitalist economies have a higher degree of government control over resources. That's the opposite, and it's not true. Command economies rely on prices to allocate resources. That is capitalist economies, not command economies. So you should have gotten C, command economies have a higher degree of government control over resources. Now the production possibilities curve, or PPC. The production possibilities curve just shows the production of two different products and a combination of those two products and the amount we can produce. But first, you need to learn about opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the loss of what you could have gained. For example, let's say instead of studying for a final exam and getting an A, I decided to go to a party. The opportunity cost of going to that party is studying and getting an A. It's basically just the loss of what you possibly could have gained. Like in that example, instead of studying for that final exam, I went to a party. The opportunity cost in that situation is studying to get an A, because that's what I possibly could have done instead of partying. So it's simply the opportunity of doing something else that you decide to do and the cost of that. So the production possibilities curve shows two different products. In this example, it shows basketballs on the x-axis and fidget spinners on the y-axis. It also shows scarcity because it shows a fixed amount of fidget spinners and a fixed amount of basketballs you can produce. You can't produce an infinite amount of fidget spinners or an infinite amount of basketballs. The curve here shows the different combinations of basketballs and fidget spinners you can produce. You can produce 9 basketballs or 0 fidget spinners, or 8 fidget spinners and 0 basketballs. You can't just produce an infinite amount, you have to decide 9 basketballs, 8 fidget spinners, or a combination of the two. The curve here shows opportunity cost. Let's start off here with 8 fidget spinners, 0 basketballs. The more and more basketballs you produce, 1 basketball, 2 basketballs, 3 basketballs, the less fidget spinners you can produce. You have to determine basketballs or fidget spinners. The more basketballs you produce, the more opportunity cost you have, because instead of producing basketballs, you could be producing fidget spinners. The more basketballs you produce, the higher your opportunity cost goes, so it starts decreasing until you reach 9 basketballs, 0 fidget spinners. So the curve shows an opportunity cost. The more basketballs you produce, the less fidget spinners you can have. The more fidget spinners you produce, the less basketballs you can have. On questions like for production possibilities curve, you're going to see different dots. A dot on the curve will show efficiency. It shows that you're producing the maximum amount of products you possibly could do. So here, these two dots would be efficient. A dot outside of the curve would be impossible. This dot, for example, shows 8 basketballs, 7 fidget spinners. The reason this is impossible is because we simply don't have the technology or capability to produce that much. That's simply out of our possible production possibilities. This is our production possibilities. Any dot outside of that would be impossible and would be simply just too difficult to do. A dot inside of the curve means we're being inefficient. We're not using our resources elegantly. Because look at this. We can produce 6 basketballs, 1 fidget spinner. But we could be producing 6 basketballs, 6 fidget spinners. That shows inefficiency because we're not actually maximizing the amount of products we possibly could be using. We're not using the maximum amount of resources. So just remember, a dot on the curve means efficiency. A dot outside of the curve means it's impossible. A dot inside of the curve means it's inefficient. So now we can have different types of production possibilities based on the opportunity cost. A linear line, like the one right here, means the two products are similar. Like in this example, t-shirts and hoodies. They're similar because there's both garments. They both are similar production. Because of this, the opportunity cost of these two products are the same. Producing one hoodie means you can produce one less t-shirt, and that's the same, so it's linear. But if two products are not similar, let's say books and robots, then it will be concave or curvy like this, or concave and curvy like this. That's because they're not similar. That's because for every book, it's going to have a small amount, and then it's going to start increasing. So it's going to have an increasing amount of opportunity cost. So just remember, if they're two related products, their PPC graph will be constant like this. If they're two unrelated products, then it'll be concave or curvy like this. So now we can also shift the production possibilities curve. Remember, the production possibility curve just shows the amount of products or resources we can actually use. Like in this example, this is the maximum amount we can produce at a certain time. But let's say there's an increase in technology, an increase in innovation, and we can produce more products in general. If there's more economic growth, there will be a shift upward because we can produce more goods and services. So there's more opportunities, more combinations we can produce, so there would be more. So in this example, there would be a line like this. It would be a larger line. It would be able to produce more and more goods and services. But the opposite can be true. Let's say there's an economic recession, or we can produce less products. In that example, where we can produce less and less products, there would be a contraction because there would be less opportunities, less possibilities of production, and less items we can actually produce. So just remember, we can shift the production possibilities curve. If there's an event that causes more production of a good, it will shift upward. If there's an event that makes it so that we can produce less of a good, it will shift back. So just remember that. The law of increasing opportunity cost states that there will be increasing opportunity cost as you produce one product. This is because we're losing out on one product more and more if you produce only one good or service. That's what causes this concave production possibilities curve over this constant production possibilities curve. So now here's two different questions with production possibilities curve. Pause and try and solve this yourself. Okay, so for this first question, based on the production possibilities curve for books and pencils shown above, what is the opportunity cost of producing a book? So the main thing you should notice is that this is a constant opportunity cost because it's pencils and books. So we can either produce 10 books, 0 pencils, or 30 pencils, 0 books. So what is the opportunity cost of producing one singular book? So that would simply be 3 pencils. This is because you can either have 10 books or 30 pencils. If you're producing 10 books, then you lose out on 30 pencils. So since it's constant, you divide 30 by 10 and you get 3 pencils, so you should get C. For this question, given the production possibilities curve above, which of the following represents a movement from efficiency to inefficiency? So for this question, you should remember any dot on the line, no matter where it is efficient. A dot outside the line is impossible. A dot inside the line is inefficient. So A, point X to point W, shows efficiency to inefficiency. That would be correct. B, X to Z, that just shows efficiency to efficiency. Since we're just moving the curve, that's nothing. Point Y to point Z, again, is just moving along the curve. Point W to point Z, that's inefficiency to efficiency. Point V to point Y, that's impossible to efficiency. So we have A, point X to point W. Of international trade. International trade is just the trade between two different countries for two different products, and this is because consumers of one country or consumers of another country want the products of another country. International trade is all about specialization, the idea that countries specialize and concentrate in one different product because trade allows them to specialize in different products. Also, be aware that international trade can shift the production possibilities curve since countries can now consume more than their previous amounts. So if there was an increase in international trade, like in this example, we would see a shift outward since we can now consume more and more products. Now let's go on to per unit opportunity cost. For example, let's say there was a $100 cost to produce 5 different hoodies. The per unit opportunity cost would be the opportunity cost per product. So it would be the total opportunity cost, $100, divided by the units gained, which would be 5, giving you the per unit opportunity cost. So in this example, 100 divided by 5, which would give you $20. So now you have two different advantages in international trade. You have an absolute advantage, which is the country that can produce the most of a product, and a comparative advantage, which is the country that has the lowest opportunity cost of a product. For example, let's say that the United States and Canada were trading two different products, and Canada could produce more maple syrup than the United States. In that example, Canada would have the absolute advantage since Canada can produce more maple syrup. A comparative advantage is the lowest opportunity cost. So let's say the United States can produce maple syrup at $5, while Canada can produce maple syrup at $10. The United States would have the lowest opportunity cost because they can produce maple syrup at only $5 while Canada is losing it at $10. So the United States would have a comparative advantage since it has the lowest opportunity cost for that exchange. So let's look at an example question. In this question, we have country A, country B, and they're producing cars and jetpacks. In the situation above, country B would have an absolute advantage in jetpacks since country A can only produce 1,000 jetpacks and country B can produce 4,000 jetpacks. So country B can produce more jetpacks. For cars, country B also has an absolute advantage since country B can produce 2,000 cars while country A can only produce 1,000. So country B has an absolute advantage in cars and jetpacks. Now let's look at opportunity cost. This is a little bit harder. So for country A, they can produce 1,000 cars or 1,000 jetpacks. That means the per unit opportunity cost of one car is just one jetpack because you're only exchanging one car for one jetpack. So for opportunity cost, just try to find how many cars for how many jetpacks. So in this example, it would be 1-to-1. For country B, 2,000 jet cars for 4,000 jetpacks. That means their per unit opportunity cost would be 2 jetpacks for every car. This is because there's 2,000 cars, 4,000 jetpacks. So you're losing 2 jetpacks for every car you're producing. So that's how you find that per unit opportunity cost. So you have to find the country with the lowest opportunity cost. So let's look at cars first. So for country A, they have a 1-to-1 opportunity cost. For country B, for every car they produce, they lose 2 jetpacks. So country A would have a comparative advantage in cars because they're only losing 1 jetpack, while country B is losing 2 jetpacks. So country A would have a comparative advantage. Now let's look at jetpacks. Country A has a 1-to-1 exchange, so their opportunity cost would be 1. So for every jetpack they produce, they lose 1 car. For country B, for every jetpack they lose 0.5 cars. So country B would have a comparative advantage in jetpacks since they have a lower opportunity cost. An easier way to do this is actually to multiply the two numbers. It's also called the quick and dirty method. So the way you do the quick and dirty method is by multiplying the diagonal. So in this example, it would be 1,000 times 4,000, which would give you 4 million, while 2,000 times 1,000, that would be 2 million. So 4 million is larger than 2 million, so this diagonal would be the comparative advantage. So you can find country A has a comparative advantage in cars, and then in that example, country B would have a comparative advantage in jetpacks. So also another way to do comparative advantage, if country A has a comparative advantage in cars, you know country B would have a comparative advantage in jetpacks. No country can have 2 comparative advantages. You can't have a comparative advantages in both cars and jetpacks. You can only have 1 comparative advantage. That's how it is in every single question. There's only 1 comparative advantage for each country. So in this question, country A can only have 1 comparative advantage, country B can only have 1 comparative advantage. For absolute advantage, a country can have 2 absolute advantages or 0 absolute advantages. It just depends on the question. So now we have terms of trade. So let's go back to cars and jetpacks. Terms of trade is simply just the different trading arrangements that would benefit both parties. So in this example, country A gets 1 jetpack for 1 car, while country B gets 0.5 jetpacks for 1 car. The terms of trade, country B could give 1 car for 0.8 jetpacks. You just simply have to find the exchange that benefits both parties. So there's different combinations that actually satisfy the terms of trade. In this example, country B would give 1 car for 0.8 jetpacks, and that would benefit both parties since country B would get more jetpacks than they normally would, which they normally would get 0.5, but they get 0.8, and country A would benefit since they're getting more cars. So terms of trade is just trying to find the most beneficial thing for both parties. Of cost-benefit analysis. All day, every day, you make decisions based on cost-benefit analysis. You weigh the benefits and costs of a certain decision and determine if you should do that action. Governments, societies, and people do this all the time based on economics. A trade-off is all the alternative options given up for your decision. So all the alternatives you gave up for one single decision. The opportunity cost is the most alternative given up for your decision. So the most optimal alternative. So the best decision you could have made. For cost-benefit analysis, there's 2 different types of costs that you need to weigh. Implicit costs, which are the opportunity cost of a decision, so what you could have done instead of what you actually did, and explicit costs, which are the direct out-of-pocket costs. For example, if a business has to pay $25,000 for electricity or $50,000 for employees, that is an explicit cost. It's just direct out-of-pocket costs. Now we also have revenue. Revenue is the total amount of money a business receives. So let's say Amazon sells 10 pounds of grass for $100. Their total revenue would be $100. This is the total amount of money they receive. Profit, on the other hand, is revenue minus the cost of production. So Amazon's revenue would be $100 if they sold 10 pounds of grass for $10. But let's say the cost of production was $50. Then their profit would be $50. Profit is the take-home money a business gets. It's the money they receive after they pay their costs. And there's two different types of profit that we use in economics. Accounting profit, which is the total revenue minus the explicit costs, the out-of-pocket business costs. Economic profit is total revenue minus explicit plus implicit costs. So just remember, accounting profit is total revenue minus explicit, the out-of-pocket costs. Economic profit is total revenue minus explicit plus implicit costs. So economic profit is both out-of-pocket and opportunity costs. And profit is just revenue minus cost of production. How to analyze costs, but how do we analyze benefits? And that brings us on to utility maximizing. In later units, you're going to learn about the word marginal. Think of marginal as additional, or think of it mathematically as the slope rate of change if you take in calculus derivative. It's simply just the additional amount that's added. Let's say, for example, I say marginal revenue. It's just the additional revenue you receive after a certain amount of time. In your daily life, you need to make decisions based on benefits and costs. Marginal analysis analyzes the exact benefits and which options you should do to maximize your benefits. And the way we do that is by using utils. Utils are kind of a fictitious unit. It's not really quantifiable. It's just a way of weighing different decisions. I could say that I get 10 utils from consuming an apple. It's just a way of saying the amount of satisfaction a product gives you in a way of weighing that amount of satisfaction. Now we have the law of diminishing marginal utility. The law of diminishing marginal utility states as you consume more of a product, the additional satisfaction gain decreases. For example, you don't consume hundreds of apples because the more and more apples you consume, the less you want apples, the less appetizing you get, the less satisfaction you get. That's why we don't consume hundreds of apples or hundreds of different products. It's because we get less and less satisfaction, less and less utility from it. The law of diminishing marginal utility. Now we have utility maximizing, which is what we always do. We always try to maximize the amount of utility for the amount we want to spend. So here's kind of an example question you could receive in a marginal utility you could get. Apples are $8, bananas are $4. So for utility maximizing questions, you want to decompose it by dollar. So for this one, $10, you get 10 marginal utility for $8. And for this, you get 8 marginal utility for $4 in just one quantity. So you would want to buy bananas because for every dollar, you would receive 2 marginal utility, while in this scenario, you would receive, like 1.1, 1.2. You get more marginal utility per dollar. So you want to make it marginal utility per dollar because that's how you want to maximize your utility. You want to maximize it by dollar. So now you have 1 banana. So now you go down to the second column. Since you have 1 banana, you're at the second quantity. So now you get 1 marginal utility per $1 for bananas, but in this scenario, you get 1.1, 1.2 marginal utility per dollar for apples. So now you'd want an apple. So now you have 1 apple, 1 banana. You're just trying to find the option that gives you the most utility per dollar. So now you have 1 banana, 1 apple. In this situation, you get 1 utility per dollar. In this situation, you'd get, 0.9 utility per dollar. So you'd go with another banana since you get more utility. So now you have 2 bananas, 1 apple. Now you go down again. You get a little less than 1 utility per dollar. You get a little more, slightly more. So you'd go with an apple. So 2 and 2. And also notice the law of diminishing marginal utility. The more you consume, the more quantity you have, the less marginal utility you have. So quantity 1, 10. Quantity 2, 7. Quantity 3, 5. 8, 4, 3. The utility is constantly decreasing. That's the law of diminishing marginal utility. So now some key terms you should probably know. Remember, microeconomics is just small economic units. Things like businesses, families, individuals. It's just studying small economic units. Macroeconomics, on the other hand, is big economic units, typically the government. So positive statements are statements based on facts or are real. Like, for example, let's say I stated that the GDP increased by 2%. That's a positive statement. A normative statement is a statement based on opinion and are not objectively real. For example, let's say that I say that the economy is not doing great. That is a normative statement. It's based on opinion. It's not really based on fact or objectively real. Productivity is the measure of how much one economic unit can produce. So it's just how much and how productive or how efficient one economic unit really is. Capital goods are products that are used to increase productivity and increase production of other goods and services. So it's really just a good that you purchase that increases your productivity. That's what a capital good is. So for businesses, that would be machinery or possibly computers, just things that increase workers' productivity. Consumer goods are just regular products you and me buy. Things like groceries, food, etc. Things that we need to survive. Things that don't necessarily increase our productivity, but things we need to get by. Investment is money spent by businesses on improving their productivity through capital goods. Basically, it's just businesses spending money on capital goods to increase their productivity. Physical capital is any human made resource that is used to create goods and services. So things like machinery, factories, things like wrenches, anything that's actually there that improves productivity, or any resource that is used to create goods or services. So things like machinery, etc. Human capital, on the other hand, is skills or knowledge that humans acquire and can provide. Things like a university degree or high school degree, or like coding knowledge, any skill or knowledge that a human has that they can apply to a field that can make them more productive is human capital. So now in the description, I have 15 AP style questions, some from actual AP exams, some that I made, that can actually help you on all these topics, from scarcity to economic systems to production possibilities, international trade, cost benefit analysis, utility, everything. Some of them can be tricky, some of them we didn't cover necessarily, but you can apply what we learned to actually solving them, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.